Good afternoon to everyone joining us at this year's European Chatbot and Conversational AI Summit 2022. And welcome to the discussion and panel about the future of conversational AI for this year and the following. We've got a great range of people and speakers from all walks of life and companies and different geographic locations. So I'm sure you're going to get a lot of helpful information today. And before I sort of let everyone introduce themselves, just a bit of housekeeping, questions till the end if you can. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this session. So I'll pass it on. A little bit about myself. I'm Bryn. I'm the product lead at NIB Health Funds, a big health provider here in Australia. I'm actually currently located in Perth, and I work on a chatbot or conversational AI system called Nibby, who can chat to you, talk to you on the phone, and all sorts of great things that I've been working on for the past 2 years. But with that, I'll pass it on to Ali.
Hello, my name is Ali. I'm a conversational designer at Woolies X, which is the digital arm of Woolworths, which is Australia's largest supermarket. I'm pretty sure it's global as well, Woolworths, but mainly it's a massive Australian company. So what I mostly do centers around conversational commerce. I work in a team of 20 where we try to automate the customer experience end to end using voice and chatbots and create really great experiences like end-to-end refunds, ID verification via IVR, things that just really make the customer process really simple and efficient. So that's me.
Great, thanks for that, Ali. I might pass over to Sridhar if you don't mind.
Hi, my name is Sridhar. I am the CEO and co-founder of Senseforth.ai. We are an enterprise-grade conversational AI platform. We have automated nearly 1 billion plus queries using our virtual assistants. We help our enterprises, our clients, in customer acquisition, customer engagement, and customer support. And last but not the least, we've been ranked number 6 in Squad 2.0, which is Stanford University's machine reading comprehension leaderboard. Thank you.
That's great. There's some awesome achievements there for you and the team. With that, I might pass over to Denise.
Yes, hi everyone. Good day to everyone. I'm Denise and I work as a conversation designer at Salesforce. I work in the platform and I mainly focus on Sales Cloud and Revenue Cloud.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's cool. I'm sure there's going to be some great insight there from you, Denise. And last but not least, Gary.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Gary Pretty. I'm a principal program manager at Microsoft, working on the Power Virtual Agents product that allows anybody to come and build conversational AI applications. And my specific focus is on the authoring within the application and how we can enable folks to build great experiences.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. So that's our star-studded cast for this afternoon, this evening, or wherever you may be. But we're going to get into a few things today. But first of all, I think we'd like to start with the sort of question of what does a conversational AI team look like in 2022, and how will teams sort of, and we've lost Denise. We might keep going. I'm sure she'll be back. But with that, I might pass on to Gary. So what does the conversational AI team look like in 2022, and how does that continue to grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting question at the moment, and I guess it's a very dynamic answer. I mean, if we look back over, a few years ago, the building of chatbots and chatbot applications was really contained within sort of data science, very sophisticated computer programmers who had access to natural language models, etc. And it was quite a niche area. And with the introduction of, a number of applications such as the conversational AI stack at Microsoft, that sort of broadened out over the last few years to development teams. And we sort of really, the whole industry empowered anybody who was a developer to go and build these applications. But I think what we're seeing more and more of now is, and I think it's through necessity, is the need for other disciplines, other roles to be involved within the design, build, maintenance of conversational AI applications, because they're really no different to any other application fundamentally, just like a website or a mobile app. You need people from many disciplines. And so we're seeing a a huge increase in these cross-discipline teams, so that anybody from a business user right through to a pro developer, and still, IT have a significant role to play as well. And so we really think about this as like a fusion team, bringing all of these roles together. And it will vary from business to business how they, the roles that they play, and the significance of that particular role within a particular project or the point in the life cycle. But it's now very much not a single discipline. It's very much across the business.
Nice. And Sridhar, do you have any comments around what the teams look like, and maybe some experience you've seen within some of the enterprises you've been working closely with? I know you see a lot of range of companies. Is there anything, what do teams specifically look for, or how you think they might grow?
Absolutely. In fact, I sort of echo what Gary was saying. We are building multidisciplinary skills, and that's what we are seeing all around. In fact, people with user empathy within the multidisciplinary teams, we are looking at people with user empathy, with UX skills, plus language and writing skills, and some amount of domain knowledge together sort of creates a killer combo. And voice AI, again, brings a completely new perspective. Here we are talking about dialogue writing skills. Here we are not talking about long form content or a short form content. We are clearly talking about a micro content, which is what we are seeing. And also another key thing that we are also seeing this year is personality design skills, which is very crucial and an emerging skill, because the designer needs to create a specific personality of the virtual assistant based on the target user profile, and even sometimes brand ethos of the organization. And these are the last but not the least, and people also make huge mistakes in terms of hiring, especially for testing. Conversational AI testing is not like the regular software testing. In fact, you need to have a completely different profile for conversational quality assurance. That's another emerging skill that we're seeing.
Cool, that's great. I might pass over to you, Denise. Is there anything specifically in your role that you see is changing within the way teams are formed at Salesforce, or anything you've noticed at your time there?
Like for us, we would like to call ourselves as full stack conversation designers. Like, what is a full stack conversation designer? We mainly, we don't just write dialogues. We also do workshops. We advocate for the craft, because if you think about it, conversation design is still a very new job. It's a new career. So even at Salesforce, we have to advocate for the craft. We facilitate workshops. We don't just write dialogues and build it. We basically are full stack designers. I'm not sure if you've heard that term before, but that's what we do. We write dialogues, we analyze intents, and we also try to write the dialogues in our own tool, which is the Einstein bot filter.
That's great. That's really interesting to understand that concept of the full stack designer. I know you're also in that field. Ali, can you sort of echo that, or talk us a little bit more about how that process works at Woolies, or what that team build up is like for a designer?
So for us, I think I really like that sentiment of the full stack designer, because conversational designers aren't just people who write scripts. Essentially, we have to think of everything when it comes, there's project management, there's personality design, as Sridhar was saying, how teams are briefed in, and also how we can communicate our problem solving in a way that's really simple and understandable from stakeholders and for developers. So I think, full stack designer is a great way to describe what we do, I guess. But I also think one of the things that I'm seeing in our team is more collaboration between developer and designer. We're using more interactive and rich prototyping and design tools like VoiceFlow. Shout out to the VoiceFlow team. So basically we can create conversational journeys and prototype them on the spot, so we can take stakeholders and developers through the process so easily, and that gives stakeholders more input on the spot, and developers can weigh in on the spot as well with what's possible, what's not possible, how we can make things better, et cetera, et cetera.
That's great. That's really interesting. I mean, from anyone's experience, do they understand that? Is there a difference now between the technology makeup of teammates as a designer, you traditionally want to have front end, back end engineer. Are we starting to notice other technical skill sets coming into the team? And if that's changed, if anyone could speak to that.
Well, I think Sridhar pointed it out. Definitely there's more need for QAs in conversational AI. There's so much that goes into the platform, and things can be broken really easily. And we're very lucky to have a really thorough and efficient QA. But I think it's something that we're definitely going to see a lot more of in conversational AI teams for sure.
And what's some of the tasks they perform and help sort of support the team in that sense, going in deep there?
Well, I think they kind of try to break the bot on purpose so we can make sure that things are working perfectly well. For example, we might be getting all this funding for a big journey we're doing for a vertical. I'm just talking in Woolworths terms because we're customer facing. We receive all this money to make this big shiny product. We have to make sure that it's working basically perfectly from the beginning. No bot is absolutely perfect, but you want to make sure that all your bases are covered and the customer is happy, and also the fact that you won't be facing too many roadblocks while the customer is actually using the product. So I think a QA is very important. I think teams are becoming much more mature, and that's something that's being added to I guess the full lineup more frequently.
Nice. I think that's interesting. And I think that the one thing to call out myself, I've noticed is, data science and machine learning. I think that's something I've probably never understood a lot of, and even probably still don't to a certain degree. But I think, as a designer or a product manager, developer, you learn to understand basically how language models work and why the bot said this and why the bot said that, depending on what piece of software you're using. So I think that underlying domain knowledge is coming through a lot more, and especially when it comes to training a bot and working with engineers to get your training times down or understand why your bot's choosing this sentence over another.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think the most fundamental thing that I think has happened and is still continuing to happen is the realization that this can't just be and is not just a developer discipline, right? I think that it took a long time for that realization to happen in the world of the web and in the world of a sort of more traditional app design. And the same thing is playing out in conversational design and conversational development. It's just happening at an accelerated pace. I think that the other factors that are really interesting that are coming into play is still within many organizations. I think the group here are very lucky, right? We get to spend our entire careers, our entire sort of professional time working within the space of conversational AI. But there are still plenty of examples out there, customers that we work with, where you will have teams that are responsible for the web and they're responsible for the app, and now they're responsible for the bot. And so they are playing multiple roles. And so quite a lot of the time we're seeing alignment between roles. So you'll have the people who are working on the UX on web who are now working on the UX design for the bot. It's a very different discipline, but they are really expanding their skill set. And I think it remains to be seen yet whether or not, does this just become a part of a UX designer's toolkit over time? Because plenty of UX designers work on both web and app. So does conversational design fall into that, or does it end up, carving out its own role? Now, I guess it's probably going to be a mixture of the two, depending on the individual teams. But it's just fascinating to see it at the moment. It's it really is changing all the time.
It's interesting you say that, though, because I went to an event last week. It was about conversational enterprise software or something like that in Australia. And the guy who was leading the event, he said, I'm going to post, I've got a LinkedIn post with 40 amazing jobs in the industry. For anyone looking for work, check out this post. So out of interest, I just went to go have a look at the post. And there was not one conversational designer role on this 40 strong LinkedIn post. And I was like, some teams, I think it's still, I think we're all really lucky. We work in really mature teams who understand the product and whatnot. But for new teams and for teams that are juggling, as you were saying, it's often quite developer focused, or bot trainers doing the role of the conversational designer, or product leads or developers. And you can tell straight away when teams are conversational designers. The proof is definitely in the pudding, for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other factor I was going to mention is the almost commoditization of certain aspects of the design and build process, right? It's not that long ago that you as a somebody developing a bot application would absolutely have to go and create your own natural language model, defining all of the entities, defining all of the intents, and actually really getting quite technical. Whereas more and more now within the industry, you can still do that. And in many cases, you need to. But more and more, we're seeing almost the sort of AI assisted development where you don't need that necessarily that sort of base level knowledge. You can really build on top of existing tools and existing models that are there. You don't really need to understand how entities work. You get a grasp for it over time, but actually I think the barrier to entry has just dropped dramatically for people. So I think as that happens, more and more people are entering the space, but it just makes it more confusing about who is going to work in the space because it means anybody can.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I just want to add one point there. We're also seeing another new role called the workflow designer, where there is a cross-pollination of skills happening. It's not just multidisciplinary, but somebody with the knowledge of, let's say, conversational design plus of course how the the interaction skills and domain skills, and also some amount of tech skills wherever the API integrations are required. So that's getting fused too. That's a very, very, very unique role that's emerging. But of course, they could be operating in silos too.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think there's a lot of tools now coming out, and designers are learning to help build some of that work in, as it doesn't require as much developer heavy work. So I think there's something we can take away for anyone out there watching, hire more conversational designers, not stop just hiring technologists. But with that said, I think there's some really interesting points there. So if you have any more questions, you can obviously hit us up about this topic. We probably won't be live, so LinkedIn's probably your best bet. But I think now moving into the next part, I think some of us have touched on it slightly. There's a lot of different skill sets, a lot of different people joining the team. So what are some of these processes when creating conversational AI? And we've heard loosely there, but I'd love to dive a little bit deeper. And maybe Denise, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, what are some of those processes you use when designing and interacting with developers, but also stakeholders as well, to sort of share what you're doing and how you look to improve your current product?
Yes, of course. So one of the first steps in creating a conversational AI, so in our conversation design framework, we start with the discovery phase, wherein we conduct workshops. So in that workshops, we make sure that we invite cross-functional teams. So even if I don't work with end users, like I work in a platform, in that workshop, we have architects, researchers, like our engineers, our PM and UX, just to have all the different perspectives, and having those perspectives make sure that our design is accessible and inclusive for our end users. So having workshops also give the stakeholders ideas on what is conversation design, what do we do, and when we analyze the different user needs, we also think of use cases based on that user needs. After thinking of use cases, we analyze now what are good candidates for conversation design, because maybe there are some use cases that are not fit for conversation design. So that is our process. Like, we do workshops, we advocate for the craft, identify the user needs, problems, like what is the vision of the whole team, and then think of the different use cases and the different candidates for conversation design. I think that's our process. That's how we do it.
Nice. It's really interesting. And can you say sort of specifically sometimes what stakeholders are looking for when you're sort of presenting some of this work, or the things that interest them specifically that you've noticed throughout this process?
So like in the workshops, we also analyze the different metrics. So you always need to bring like the business value, like what value will it bring to the business? For example, you want to solve for this one use case. You make sure that it ties to the business value. So that's one of the things that I see that interests the stakeholders.
Yeah. of course, it always must be having value back up to the top, and also for our end user as well.
Exactly.
Sridhar, is there anything you'd like to add there in some of the processes you've noticed through multiple enterprises you've engaged, or things stakeholders specifically look for when being involved in some of the projects you've been involved in?
Sure. In fact, there are three specific things that I can highlight, especially when it comes to stakeholder engagement for conversational AI. The number one is there is a huge misconception that AI will learn everything and it'll learn by itself and it'll do magic for them. So that's a misconception that we need to sort of dispel early on and set the expectations straight. So that is one key thing that we do all the time. The second is some of the functions, especially in customer service and similar functions, they're sort of scared that the conversational AI is going to take away their job. So it is very, very important to sort of sensitize them that this is a technology that actually can augment the human skills and the human teams rather than really taking away the jobs, right? So and of course the kind of volumes that we are seeing, the enterprises are seeing, that typical human teams will not be able to handle. So so that kind of first line of defense where conversational AI comes into the picture, and then of course the complex queries and stuff can be handled by humans, more creative stuff, more analytical stuff. That kind of sensitization becomes very, very critical when we're engaging with the stakeholders. And the third thing, which is my favorite, is that unlike any other piece of software, conversational AI can evolve every day. So the whole idea of evolving the solution across its life cycle on a daily basis with supervised training, it makes it extremely unique. And that's where the power lies, and that's where it sort of sets to behave like magic.
Yeah, I love the the first point that you you had there around expectation setting, because I think it's so critical with stakeholder engagement, and it really comes back to what Denise was saying about making sure that you've got everybody and all of the right people in the room, right from the inception of the project. And I think where we're seeing that fail sometimes, good examples of why you need to do that with some of the people that we work with, is there's a, I think, because again it goes back to other types of application design. If I'm building a website, I'm building a web page, and I drop a button on the web page, there's only so many things that can happen there, right? What if someone clicks that button? Either they're going to click it or they don't. And so there's some sort of predetermined routes that the user can go down. And I think designing for that, you can fall into the trap with conversational design that you ask the user a question and people don't really consider all of the edge cases. So you have to have someone in the room who really understands the fact that they might interrupt. They might, their response might be ambiguous. They might actually be looking to switch an intent. So it's important to have at least sort of conversational AI experts in the room, along with the domain experts, and almost expectation setting as well, in that you can't expect to get this thing right on day one, right? Day one, you're not going to launch this and you've tested it to the nth degree and it's going to catch everything, because it's just unrealistic. And more we're starting to get that message across to customers, but you still find customers who will turn up and they will approach it as if they can get it 100% right 100% of the time. Here's all of their tests. They've got 100% test coverage. And so I think that expectation setting is just so critical for stakeholder management, because it's our job, anybody working in this industry, to educate people. Because if we don't educate people, it just causes mistrust of the technology further down the line. I've seen it a few times where customers have rolled something out. They've had misaligned expectations of what it can do, and then it puts them back. They still end up rolling it out, but they roll out slower because it takes some time to actually build up that trust.
That's really interesting. I might just quickly jump in there. The second one, I think you said, Sridhar, is about it's not here to take people's jobs, and I've worked in an enterprise where there's a lot of support staff that you work with, and their initial reaction is, they might it might take my job. I think fair enough, because the bot is answering some of those questions. But I found instead of having this like the bot versus you, I think it's been crucial to bring them in on that design process early on and identify some of the problems people are having. And generally those people, and if you are working on a platform team, you're not always the closest to the customer, and these people can be sometimes your biggest tool and asset into understanding more about the customer and where they're going wrong. And it's simple as setting up an internal workplace group or Slack channel or something similar, where people are continuously posting feedback, and they kind of find it like exciting to when they hear the bot going wrong and they post that feedback consistently, and then sort of involving them. Okay, it was wrong. Where should we have sent them, or how could we have answered that question, and involve it. And then when that goes back into production, again, they see that conversation transferred to them, maybe or not, and then they start feeling engaged and really build a relationship with the bot in an interesting way.
Yeah,
it's a good point. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say that, for us, it's been all about laying down those foundations with all the teams we work with, because we've been working with them already for a couple of years. So it's at the point where we've got this really, this kind of the symbiosis between the domain owners and the designers and the developers. We all kind of understand each other, and the stakeholders get really excited about putting, input into what the next journey we build for them could be, like what the next experience could be for the customer. And that often comes from them. So giving them that power, making them feel empowered, that they're making an impact in our bot ecosystem is really great for them. And it's something that creates a really positive environment. And it's interesting because, initially, it's an environment where people think we're taking their jobs, but, eventually they're like, oh, how can we make this process so much better? We don't have to do this really mundane task anymore. So I think it's kind of grown.
That's it, right? I mean, I think it's getting across to people and helping people understand that this is not about replacement. This is about augmentation, right? This is about taking away the mundane tasks so that you can be more valuable, right? And you can be more motivated, because it helps end customers because they're waiting less time to be serviced, and it's helping the agents because they are spending less time doing mundane tasks. And one of the analogies I've used in the past is you think back to, I don't know, 100 years ago, I don't know when the technology was created, but people who worked in a bank would need to count all of the money manually, and it would take time. You would rock up with a whole bunch of notes or a bunch of change, and they'd have to sit there and they'd have to count it, taking time, and probably got really sick of it by the end of the day. And then someone introduced a funky new machine which actually just drop the money into and it counts it for you, because then you can get more done, you're more motivated, there's less of a sort of a boring part of your day. And I think it's really getting that across to people. And I think we're starting to see that now, because a lot of the focus that we see is all around agent assist. It's not about selling bots on their own. It's about selling bots as part of a broader thing, like a contact center, right? And I think if you sell it and position it in that way, it's much easier for people to sort of get their heads around.
In fact, I asked one of the customer service teams, how many times in a day would you like to answer the question, where's my order? Right? So I mean, you have to do that for 250 times in a day. You might as well quit the job and do something else. So that worked on that day.
But honestly, for us, we work a lot with the customer hub team, which is the contact center, and they basically look at their top queries every quarter, and they come to us being like, how can we automate these queries so we don't have to answer them anymore? And that's generally what we're doing. For example, it takes forever to ID an insurance customer, because you have to, ask what's your address, what's your blah, 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 what's your blah, blah, blah. Now we do that with the bot in like 10 seconds. So that's something they don't have to do. Or how do I make a payment? The bot tells you how to make a payment, or the bot makes a payment for you. Or how do I find an item on the website? The bot tells you where you can find the product. So I just think now the customer service teams, they're all about it. They're like, yes, yes, yes. I don't want to answer these boring questions anymore.
And they have goals as well, right? Like how long it takes to handle a call or a chat, and if it's too long, so if you're helping speed up that process like authentication, it leaves them more time to focus on actually helping them. So it is twofold at times, especially when, some of those business metrics require reduction in handle time or average handling time. I think that's a really interesting one. Is there anything else anyone would like to share before we sort of move on to the next question?
I would like to share about I just want to go back to like setting expectations.
Yeah.
So for anyone who needs to advocate for the craft, I think when you talk about what conversation design does, you can start also, like someone mentioned, like creating a Slack channel. So what I usually do is like create a Slack channel for like the domain participants before the workshop. And in that Slack channel, you talk about like some pre-work and also the different deliverables that you will be giving everyone and what are the next steps. So through that, everyone gets excited, everyone collaborates, and it helps basically set expectation on what conversation design could do for the team.
That's really good. I think just in general with the keeping people engaged now that we're on Zoom so much, I think giving them that little bit of excitement before the meeting, so we know all how it starts. Sometimes we all get there and no one knows what they're doing, and then everyone just talks for an hour and nothing gets done. I think everyone's been in at least one or two of those in the past week, even possibly. So I think that is a really good point, especially if people aren't. I think someone also said earlier, might have been Gary or yourself, Denise, like advocating for that product and that process and sharing information. So the setting those expectations, even so we don't get to the meeting and someone asks for them to do a little bit of magic, like you referred area. Go on.
And also like that Slack channel could also be like an avenue wherein you show what are the next steps, because after doing those workshops, like people need to know what's going to happen to the different things that we did there. So having that place could be very helpful for the stakeholders.
And sometimes people don't always feel like they can ask certain questions if they don't know a lot of information about the specific domain or conversational AI. So it provides that channel afterwards for them to give feedback or ask any questions to follow up. I think that's a really good point, Denise.
I'll just add another thing there quickly, sorry, as well.
No, you go.
So just to go back on what we were talking about before, how I was chatting about how the developer designer relationship is becoming much more of a collaborative one, using tools like interactive tools, design tools like VoiceFlow. Sorry for the plug.
Another one.
Another one. No,
Sponsored by.
No. So it's kind of cool though, because when you come to these kind of discovery workshops, or if you've had a briefing before, you're able to often stakeholders have a hard time picturing how things are actually going to work. So if you can actually come with some sort of a demo to a discovery session or to one of the first sessions you have, they get so excited about it from the beginning. And that's what I really love about how the way these design platforms are moving from just the 2D flow chart to like beyond as well. So I think definitely to look for.
I completely recognize that. So before being at Microsoft, over the last few years, I was on the digital agency side of things. And so I was out there working with customers, and we were selling the service of, working with them to build out these applications. And the fact that the tooling has become so straightforward to actually get started and, build, a relatively sophisticated, albeit happy path, dialogue, it made our process. Before we went to see the customer, we'd do our research, we'd understand what are the key use cases, and we would build that demo. And the moment you walk in and you show them that demo, everybody suddenly gets the value, right? I think when you are, I think we had some early experiences when we first started talking about it, where we'd say, we want to come in and talk to you about chatbots. We want to come and talk to you about conversational AI. And we walk in, we didn't have a demo. We'd start to talk about it. And the people on the other side of the table would have completely misaligned expectations about what we were talking about. And so I think it's so important to actually demonstrate the technology, at least a simple use case, so that everyone goes, okay, I get it. It's not Kit from Knight Rider that we're talking about, or it might be, I guess, right? If you're building for a car, I guess. So I think that alignment on what is the space, because it's still a very broad area, right? I mean, I think, there's different channels, there's different modalities, and I think aligning on that is super helpful, especially for people who are new to the space.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I've even prototyped things up before where, record my own voice and then download a Amazon Poly voice and slice them up together in Final Cut or something and share it, on a slideshow or PowerPoint, but now we do have the luxury of some of these other tools and ways of engaging people. So it definitely does help. With that, good segue, voice, we're talking a little bit about voice here, but, some people work more predominantly in chat, and I kind of want to know, for this year and potentially the next year, are we all in on voice or chat, or is it a hybrid of both? I know from where I've come from, it was very much messenger focused bots for a long time in sales and marketing, and utilizing some of those notifications and re-engaging tools. Now that people don't have to download another app, we can engage people directly through messenger, through to contact center AI, where chat is a great platform for people who speak multiple languages, who don't feel confident over the phone, all the way through to people speaking on the phone, older demographics who don't want to use online tools, and so forth. So I would love to get an overview, and maybe we start with yourself, Ali. What is your team focusing on? Is it voice? Is it both? Are you doing it all at once?
So I think voice is really what gets me and my team excited. We love the voice product. We're all about improving our IVRs. We experimented for a while with Google Assistant, so being able to add to cart via Google Assistant and getting that put into your online delivery. But I think chat still has its place. I think many companies outside of the realm are still getting used to chatbots and users, the laggards, as you would say, in the product lifecycle. So I still think chatbots are a way for people into the space and into the industry. So I think now that they can see what others are doing, it's about building the foundations. So eventually I think it will all just be voice. Chat still definitely has its place, but I think we focus much more on voice than chat.
And why is that?
I think the possibilities are endless. I think when you're chatting and you're typing or you're just against a screen, you're kind of limited on what you can do. With voice, that you can take the experience. We've done some experimentation with digital humans. There's phone bots. There's smart home devices. It's literally limitless. So I think chat can be quite limited, whereas voice, we're really just getting started in what we can do.
Yeah, that's interesting. The different technology that it enables. That is a good point. I mean, Gary, is there anything you'd like to add there, or anything that you've been working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely seeing a what I would call an explosion in people who are looking at the voice modality. I think for a long time it was very text focused. I think to a large degree that had a lot to do with trust in the technology. Quite often, I think enterprises quite rightly see their voice channel, that it's their primary method of contact with their end customer. It's the high value contacts with their end customer are over that contact center. And so I think there was a lot of reticence to actually automate or give up any of that. And I think that people were willing to sort of dip their toe in the water on, via Facebook Messenger, for example, a little bit earlier. But I think now that trust is building up and people are seeing success elsewhere and other businesses having success, I think that's really opening the door for people to move into the voice space. And I think a good example of that is an airline I fly a lot with started out with a Facebook Messenger enabled bot, relatively straightforward, and they did nothing with their contact center. You then called their contact center, and they'd obviously decided that, hey, you know what, this is working quite well, so we'll try some simple deflection, and if there's a long wait, then we're going to offer to send you a text message or an email, and so you can jump into that chat. So it was literally just a straightforward channel switch. And now that that seems to have worked, they now appear to be rolling out automation within the contact center as well, where you can actually now talk with a bot. And I think it's a well-trodden path for a lot of organizations where they start on one channel. It's almost like land and expand. And it really fits with the model that, we preach all the time, which is, well, certainly I do, which is start small and iterate, right? Don't try and solve the world in one go. Pick a channel, pick a modality, really work to get that right. And then once you've got, V1 out the door, continue to iterate, and then you can expand based on the data, right? That's the other thing. I think Ali, you mentioned it before, which is customers who are looking at the top intents, the top queries that are coming in for that particular quarter, and using that to really define what happens next. I think data is a very, and analytics is a very underutilized thing, even today, within conversational AI. We're all really used to having tools like Google Analytics and lots of other tools to really measure to the nth degree how people are using the website with heat maps, etc. And I think that's the way we have to go with conversational AI. The big advantage I see, and this is something that I think is not recognized enough, is with a website, I can have 100 users drop onto my website and they drop off within 20 seconds, and so my bounce rate is sky high. But it can be really difficult for me to really understand what they came there for. And I think with conversational AI you have a real advantage, because every one of those users has turned up and told you exactly what they came for, right? And so I think that data is it's a goldmine, right, for improving the service relatively quickly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I find it harder to get, information from websites and stuff, because I'm so used to sometimes conversational AI where they tell me exactly what they don't like, even to the point where they don't like one of the football players that our team sponsors on the weekend. I can get so granular about what frustrates people with either the service or the product or just anything about the business. So I think there's a goldmine not just for our teams, but for other parts of the business. I think that the hardest part is at scale when you're doing hundreds of thousands, of conversations a month, and you can't just sit there and read 100 in a spreadsheet. You can early on, but now it's like, do you aggregate them at a high level by intent? But then those intents, you can break them down even more to sub-intents and entities. Yeah, go on, Ellie.
There's some really cool platforms coming out, one which we're actually starting to use, Human First and QBox. So they're for bot trainers. More specifically, we use them all the time, but it basically allows you to feed in your data into the platform, and then it kind of gives it clusters. So it sorts your utterances into clusters, into groups, so you can see, okay, how many people are asking about this, how many fallbacks are happening where customers are asking about this, and it really makes an easy way to sort through your utterances. So I think we're also we're looking at this all the time as a team, but how can we streamline monitoring conversations so we don't have to look for needles in haystacks all the time? How can we just have the data in front of us and be, okay, this is an issue, rather than having to, dig and dig and dig. So I think for us as a team, that's definitely what we'll be doing in 2022. Part of our processes is how we can streamline that monitoring, because data is just so important to us as well.
Yeah, we're seeing it in, I think you've probably seen a start of it within agent hubs, certainly within Dynamics 365 that we have our customer service platform. We help our agents by augmenting them with AI, right? So you can recognize the sentiment live, you can recognize what are the common keywords, what are the common themes. And I think that it's just a natural next step to take that and apply that to an automated workflow where I can see, maybe even live, okay, based on the conversations that are happening right now with the bot, what are the common themes, what are the common keywords, is there a particular spike in a particular topic, and taking all of the learnings that we've had over the last 5-10 years with helping agents within a contact center and applying that to a bot. And I think the only difference is that instead of the agent deciding this is how I'm going to modify my behavior on this conversation based on this customer's sentiment or this customer's keywords, it's about somebody else behind the scenes either manually making tweaks based on that data, or more likely we actually have automated levers in the background that say, actually, we've seen a spike in requests for this particular topic. I'm actually going to make some tweaks to the model automatically for you. And I think that's probably the next step on this journey.
How does data, that's a really good point, Gary. I'm kind of curious, how does data help improve your process, Denise, and affect the design, post maybe it going into production?
I really like what Gary said about trust. So like after you ship, you iterate. That's the only way wherein we could create like a good product wherein our users would trust. So one of our tools, the Einstein Bot Builder, I think, one of our tools, like after the user talks to the bot, it has like a back end wherein it has a dashboard wherein it shows like the different like percentage of like intent usage, and also it captures all the different dialogues per conversation. So that is a really helpful tool because you have like in the bot builder, like you build a conversation, and then in the back end, you have a dashboard, and also all the different dialogues are in there. So I think for people who are building their conversational AI, like look for a platform wherein you can build a dialogue and also have that back end who could give you like data and the different dialogues that could help you iterate and improve your design.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's a good point. There's so many out there now, and some do provide some really rich level of insight into those conversations so you can iterate quickly. I mean, it's sort of the fastest way we can continue to improve. Sridhar, is there anything you sort of want to add to that conversation there, or anything you've noticed in your experience?
Sure, a couple of things. One is, there are in most of the analytics that you see, there are usage type of analytics. How many people, how many conversations from which geographies and which devices and all that stuff. That is one part. The other part is the actionable insights. So then that is what we can actually bring out from a conversation, because you have the entire conversation with you, and you can talk about, you can figure out and say where there are certain actions that can be taken, where systemic change can happen later. So those kind of insights can be bubbled up through analytics, and that's what we're working on. That's one thing that is very, very critical. And secondly, from an emotion detection point of view, I think voice makes a lot of sense. Obviously, from a voice, detecting the emotion becomes a lot more easier than the textual input, because textual input could be devoid of emotion. Even though there are methods to do it, but of course it's a lot more complex. The voice, both voice data, voice AI, and of course emotion detection through voice, all that is a lot more complex. But these things actually going to coexist in any case, and in that sense, obviously, and of course, voice is anyways a lot more powerful, and especially in some of the use cases that we are deploying. Where we're automating citizen services using voice AI in multiple languages, and that's where it becomes super powerful. And the barriers between technology and people can be broken down with voice AI.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You start to understand people's moods and their accent, and that helps you categorize them as opposed to just what they're saying. I think if you have a chatbot that's predominantly in English, there's a lot of people from a lot of different nationalities who can speak English to some degree and can have that conversation via chat, because it can be quite simple and slower. But when you hear that through voice, you definitely, everyone's speaking English but in their own version, and sometimes that can be quite difficult for a bot to understand. So that's a really interesting point.
I think multilingual bots will be a trend as also for as well. for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's certainly something that we're seeing. And I wanted to just draw out one point as well, and this is slightly tangential, but it's based on what Sridhar was saying, which is we've got analytics based on the whole conversation. And I think looking probably slightly further ahead out from where we are now, we do a great job, I think, at recognizing a user's intent based on the last thing that they said. And I think that more and more what we're going to see is more and more contextual information based on that whole conversation, helping to really influence the design, right? If I have already mentioned a particular location earlier on in my conversation, then the bot's going to start to be aware, or we need to be aware within our design that, hey, they've mentioned a location already, so that later on, if they say, how do I get there, right? It may be in two separate parts of the conversation. And so joining them up is a really complicated thing to do. But I think as we move forward, we need to look at how can we even better emulate human to human interaction. And that's something that we would naturally do. We would naturally think back to earlier on in the conversation. Did they reference a location? Okay, I'm going to join the two dots. And we see it right now on the web. Again, going back to this analogy of we just need to accelerate towards this sort of the same endpoint. On the web, there are already platforms, like it or not, that track lots of different things about you, that understand all of the behaviors. What did you click? Which products did you look at? And they really influence how your experience evolves over the course of navigating through a particular website, or maybe even across channels. And I think we're just going to see the same thing happen. But I think we have to take baby steps, because again, it comes back to trust, which is if we try and automate the automation too quickly, too soon, then we break the trust of the end users and also the people who we're building them for. So it's a really interesting space, and I think there's a path through there, but it's quite a delicate one.
I just want to add up to what you said about, for example, like you already have that data, that context of, okay, like I already gave the location. And then like after some time, like the user asked, like, how do I get there? So in linguistics, we have this concept wherein you call it grounding in conversation, wherein like after some time, someone asked about, okay, how do I get there? You don't remember the exact conversation, but you find ways on how you get to that concept. So how do I get there? Maybe the bot forgot already because it's been like an hour. So the bot would say, where was that again? Instead of saying, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. So like adding linguistic concepts could also build trust in building conversations.
That's really cool.
Fascinating.
Yeah. It's interesting. James Giancola, who's the conversational AI lead at Google, he came to speak with us, and he was saying how conversations should be designed in a way where you should put two people in a room, and you should be talking with their backs facing to it, like towards each other, and you should be talking, but like emulating the exact conversation you'd be having and putting that into a design. And that's linguistically how conversation design should be, which I found very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, it's fascinating, like adding like linguistic concepts also when you're talking to stakeholders. I remember I was once asked like by a stakeholder, okay, like but will the bot understand me? Like after I talked to it again after like 3 hours. So I asked the person like, well, in a normal conversation after 3 hours, and then you say something, I don't get it. I will find ways as a human, like to get back to that conversation and then get that concept that you were trying to tell me. So that's also how we will design conversations.
Yeah.
And we're not like, I'm sorry, I didn't get that because,
Yeah, I think things like we call it a mid-confidence flow, which is something we're implementing. Is if the utterance is matched, it's not matched with a high confidence, but it's not matched with a low confidence. It's somewhere between the 0.3 to 0.6 mark. We say, just to confirm, you're asking about returning an item, right? So we get them that affirmation so we can continue on with the journey rather than taking a shot in the dark, being like, oh, sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. So I think it's that reaffirmation, that linguistic concept that's really interesting.
And if
Yeah.
if you use Rasa here, Rasa plug, it'll show you maybe the top 3 that you're unsure about and surface that dynamically to the customer if it's
Watson
confused.
does that as well.
Does it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And Power Virtual Agents too.
That's an interesting point though before, Denise, about you weren't going to remember even as a human 3 hours ago. I think personalization is a word that's used far too much at corporate level for the sake of it. And I find sometimes having those conversations on a Google Doc or whatever it may be and just typing back and forth to someone at work can really help break down and see how that would naturally flow, or even just talking to them like we are now.
Yeah,
it depends on the channel as well. I think that the expectations change from channel to channel, right? If I call a bot, when I hang up, I'm pretty much expecting that the next time I call, I'm going to get a brand new state, brand new context. I'm calling again. It's just like I'm speaking to a different agent. Whereas if I'm on something like Facebook Messenger, where I am known to the bot, and it's persisted, I can see the previous context, I can see the previous conversation. It is effectively an endless conversation. Then my expectations are completely different. I would expect that if the bot asks me a question and I go, oh, I don't know that, but I'm going to go away, I'm going to find the answer, I'm going to come back and I'm going to answer you, the next day, I'm going to expect it to pick up from where it left off. And so I think that modifying your design, your conversation design, depending on the channel is crucial, because we have to remember that people are interacting with these channels, even over text, in very different ways. And their expectations might change. There might be nuance there, but it's important nuance.
That's why authentication is so good. If you can do it, it's definitely
right.
hard.
Yeah.
But Webflow's a couple of authenticated journeys, and they just make life so good, because it's like we know the customer and they know us, and we can see that they returned an item yesterday because it was damaged. So we can ask them about it, or we know their name, or we know where they live. Not in the creepy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not fun. I think these are all very good conversations, but I'm aware we are getting to the hour, and I think it's probably a good opportunity. And if you're to focus on one thing for the 22, and you could say it in one word, what's something you're going to be focusing on in one word for this year when you go to work and think about these conversations and conversational AI? I'll start with language would be my word. Ellie?
I'm gonna go with streamlining.
Oh.
Yeah.
Gary?
Oh,
Denise.
Denise.
All right. Okay. So I think alignment. Nice. That's my word. Alignment.
It's a great word. Gary?
Yeah, I think fusion. Since I can only have one word, I mean a fusion team, right? How cross-discipline.
That's really good. And lucky last, Sridhar, if you're picking a word for 2022?
I would say cross-pollination between technology and creative and interactive skills. So this is all that coming together would be great.
Oh, that's really good. That's a great way to finish. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you got lots of information and insightful knowledge into how teams are working and what we're focusing on for this year and so forth. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us over LinkedIn or however we may engage. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival. So thank you.